All right, live with Terry Singh. Lots of things to discuss, lots of questions, but I think Terry has all the answers.
Very
So
excited to be here, Asif. Thank you so much for, this wonderful series that you've been running the last couple of weeks. You guys are doing a very important sort of service by, bringing more awareness to the market because, as technology people, we're just, building great models,
right,
but obviously it has to land in some organization someday.
yeah,
And very happy to participate.
yeah. I mean, the series is to go beyond what I typically see on a social media. I typically see on a service level. I really want people to start scratching the surface and start digging in a little bit, right? I love that Bill Shock experience, right? That Bill Shock is what motivated me for last few weeks. I think we're in episode 6 right now. Episode 1 to 5, all we discussed is the fact that you might have a bill shock and how to avoid that. Because
Yeah.
bill shock is part of your cost benefit analysis, but it's out in the ether that you really don't know how it will end up playing out for the cost benefit analysis that you did 5 months ago. 5 months later, there's something else. And within that time frame, are you still sticking to your original return on investment that you set out to start it with, right?
Yeah.
So this bill shock idea, thanks for bringing that up because that's what we've been doing. So we want to move on from the bill shock into the next part of it. It's just that, even if you get the return on investment, how does it impact your productivity, right?
Yeah.
Um, and these are the discussions that are not necessarily a surface level conversation. You really need to have a subject matter expert, somebody who's been burnt, I would say, somebody who has felt the burnt before, to be able to discuss from their experience. And me and you, I think we've been down this tunnel before. So let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the audience, what Asif what you was been mentioning is about the bill shock. Is back in the days in cloud computing days, people I know this because we were helping pioneer parts of it when we were working for with companies like VMware, Amazon. And one of my colleagues, he came up to me and said he's got a bill of $10,000. And we used to work for like a couple of $100 of credits, cloud computing credits. Back in the day, there were no credits. We used to just get free licensing to play on Amazon cloud. That was the only cloud available. There was no GCP. There was no Azure. $10,000. So I said, wow, that's a shock. We kind of, we passed this information to our community, started warning our colleagues who were testing these services. Now, let me tell you another story. I heard last week that one of the guys who was just running some testing and training the models, he got a bill of $120,000. And this is a person like, some, I guess, an employee working at a company. So that shock you get from these cloud computing providers that are actually just they are the ones who have these trench coats and they are seducing you, let's say, with AI startups. Essentially, these are the guys who are holding the big dollars. So but I think today we're going to be talking about actually another important aspect that should help alleviate the pain of expensive computation, which is what is leading to shocks when you get those bills from your credit card, is how to make productivity actually sort of drive your performance inside your organization, because that is the reason why we're all sort of excited about running AI workloads inside our organization or in public clouds. So I guess a very small introduction about myself, since
I,
obviously,
I want to point something out. Are you a Linux guy, Terry?
yeah. So
I
that's why you see
love
that. Who am I?
this is
So
the
if you
first time
type,
I've seen it.
yeah. So yeah. So absolutely. So who am I? If you see, sometimes you don't know which environment you're working on. So then you can see your username. So
Oh,
yeah, I
man,
mean, I
that's
definitely.
a good laugh for a Friday morning. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. So yeah, who am I? So I am, part of AxeGen, where we are building an ecosystem together with experts from defense. Asif, you're yourself from a defense background. Folks from aerospace, guys who've spent decades working with Amazon Web Services, etc. But I've done some interesting things in the last 3 decades as well. Participated in pioneering virtualization. We worked at really close level with Amazon folks when they were just starting up their services back in 2008, 2009. We were fortunate enough to also participate in the AI inception phase, although AI has been on and off in the industry for the past 70 years. But the last decade and a half has been phenomenal, and we've watched everything happen. Literally razor sharp view on where to pay attention, where not to pay attention, simply because we were just spending insane amount of hours trying to understand how to build AI. So I guess in today's chat, Asif, we can go in whichever direction. We spoke about cost, I think, but maybe I can give us some perspectives from the productivity perspective.
Right.
We can do that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the cost from your perspective, because you just can never get enough of cost. Because in your journey, I think you're going around in the government space and private and commercial space all around Europe and US, sharing your knowledge. So I think this cost perspective, the way you present it, is very unique. So yeah, tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about the cost to begin with.
The interesting thing is, there's also sort of parallels to how various industries are converging, and that's why we are experiencing this cost problem in AI. So HPC, or high performance computing, as you name it, used to be a very different domain. It never touched commercial domain in the past 50 years. So if Procter and Gamble or Novartis or any other big company was doing some massive R&D project, they would go to IBM or other companies and acquire massive compute servers. And these were not AI or anything. These were just massive servers with, blades or any other system punched into it. And they're like thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of cores. And they used to do computation at various levels, even NASA and all these sort of organizations. Now, what is happening is it became a kind of AI sort of started coming as an elitist kind of culture. So first of all, not regular Joes. At least that is a perception in the market. By the way, I do not subscribe to that elitist view.
Yeah.
The perception in the market was, if you don't have a PhD, if you don't dance with big boys in Google or Facebook research teams, you don't matter.
Yeah.
So that is one elitist view. You can fight it by sort of showing a beautiful application. You can join the gang. Now, the other is the elitist view is literally, unfortunately, the view in which you should be part of the billionaires or millionaires club. I mean, literally wealthy people.
Right.
So just as an example of us being small startup, to do or to play any role in AI, we had to make investments of a couple of $100,000 to get those machines. Now, can you imagine in cloud computing days, if you spend $5,000, you had a bunch of servers, you could stack them up, you can test everything. But the cost of the GPU in itself is $40,000 a pop.
Right.
So a server that has at least 4 GPUs is where you can do something meaningful with AI. So all those things are becoming very expensive and still are. So we haven't seen a reduction in that total cost of ownership. For small startups, forget about big companies. So small startups just are not. So in a way, we are part of the elite gang because I made those investments. They were very sort of risky bets. We made the investments because I wanted my team to work on those, expensive supercomputers. but it's not something which anyone can do. So the whole perception in the market is that anyone can build anything on AI is still not true.
Right.
So if you don't belong to that big gang, you will not be able to do that stuff. So on this slide, which you're showing right now, is actually very interesting because there is a huge opportunity that is there in the market. If you look at the bottom sort of bar, that is what is AI essentially, neural networks. Everything else that is built on top is what you should be building as applications to go out and do something in the market. So if you look at, for example, adaptive robotics or 3D printing, if you see the dotted white line, that is the opportunity. So people should be building startups in that space. And similarly, go to smart contracts or next gen cloud or cryptocurrencies or anything else that you're seeing in this sort of advanced battery management. If you want to use AI, there's a huge space. So that dotted space is the space where you should be building your AI systems. But the cost has to go down. We still
Right.
don't have the answer to that. So I don't have an answer today to that because simply the NVIDIA is the only incumbent, the only big player in town. There are no alternatives.
Well, I think the way you put neural network all in the bottom and you stacked everything on top, I think that needs to have that parallel scenario of understanding, right? Understanding should be that you have all these products that you see on a surface level, but under it all is multiple neural networks working together in
Yeah.
order to support what you experience as a user on the surface level. So if you're talking about your user interface, user experience is off the wall great, is because there's some computational power and neural network working together and multiple neural networks coming together, creating multiple features. So if you think about
Yeah.
when we are talking about, hey, where we are today, we need to be somewhere light speed ahead 10 years from now, is because the surface level experience that you have, UI, UX, they will also combine and create another set of UI, UX that will be out of this world good. The speculation is it's about AGIs or super AI. Whatever the terminology is, I think it's a market hype that has not started yet and has not died down yet, because the AI space that we are experiencing right now, it is going through a hype cycle, and when the hype cycle dies down, all the dust settles, then you will see an actual picture of who survives and who's actually able to lead the charge. And
Yeah.
I think when you're discussing the financial side of aspect of it, you really have to consider the fact that it is expensive. However, you cannot spend all your budgets right now. You really have to segment it out in a way that you are able to sustain yourself up until a certain point. And as you're sustaining yourself, you're also scaling. So that means wherever you do start, if it's a single neural network and you're stacking it, you do not want to go after the Joneses. That's my always saying that, you don't want to compete with your neighbors. You want to compete on your own sustainability, which is that you're able to sustain because you have the sort of finance. And if you're able to scale, you have to scale based off of your business use case. It doesn't necessarily mean that I found this great neural network that drives the truck. Well, you are a stationary industry. You don't have any trucking industry needs. You can find a neural network that's trucking. However, you can take that trucking neural network, I'm just using a simple example here, and say, how do I adapt myself forward? How do I reduce the cost of that neural network that somebody else has developed? 80% of the work is done. I have to do 20% and tweak it for myself. And let's say you are something totally far away from trucking industry. You are an industry of Hollywood, let's say, for example. Right? You have nothing to do with trucking, but here you are using the same neural network as everybody else. So those are some of the cost-cutting measurements that you really have to sit down and discuss, but not necessarily start spending money on the hardware and infrastructure right off the bat. Because like I said, when the dust settles, you will know who survived. You won't be one of those people that actually survived this AI hype cycle. With this AI hype cycle, they come and go. And we'll talk more about that in the productivity down the road. But this is a great, great chart. I really love looking at this chart because you put out some numbers on the finance, and these are the concerns that has everybody sitting on the edge waiting to make a decision, right? I think the decision piece is what's important, not necessarily the productivity or activity, right? Because if you jump into it, you will experience what Silicon Valley has experienced for the last 15 years. They all jumped in, but they never got the return on investment.
Yeah.
you're not really alone in this equations that, hey, even if you put the money in, does not mean you get the money back, because Silicon Valley has been experiencing this in a sort of like in a shadow area where nobody really shined light into to say, like, did you get your money's worth in most use cases that you have developed for millions and billions of dollars?
Yeah, I think,
hasn't.
yeah. So you're actually, to summarize, so there are two things that are happening in the industry, and it's the only factor that differentiates the successful group versus the one that has to wait, sit on the fence and watch, is capital and cognitive fatigue. So capital fatigue is unfortunately not recoverable. You cannot recover it if you, like you rightly mentioned, if you constantly sort of, let's say you want your JP Morgan or you Morgan Stanley or any of those, big banking institutions, you want to go out and chase and want to be better or compete with OpenAI. For you, the capital fatigue is literally in your face because you have to spend those tens of millions of dollars to get infrastructure, to do those things, hire the smartest people, do that stuff, and keep doing it. The fatigue comes when the bank realizes and says, what the hell are we doing? We shouldn't be doing this. We should be serving our customers. We should go back doing KYC. We should constantly sort of make sure that our mortgage customers, our retail customers, we're serving. So eventually, the guys who come into this game burn their cash, they go through capital fatigue, and they just stop. That's fair. The other is the cognitive fatigue, is also a huge problem. So in the beginning, as you can imagine, and we saw this in the cloud computing wave as well. If you remember back in the day, Cisco and Dell and all those guys were coming up with big bang for bucks kind of approaches to set up, and still, I mean, it's really interesting because back in the days, $10 billion were like huge amount. And today, people are throwing hundreds of billions of dollars into it. So it's unbelievably sort of incomparable in terms of those two technological disruptions. But Cisco dropped out because they said, we are in the business of selling networking gear. What the hell are we doing with this? Why do we want to compete with AWS? IBM dropped out. Its cloud is still there, but they're not making the kind of money that AWS or Microsoft is making. Even Google makes just a handful of billions of dollars. That's nothing. So this is what's going to happen as well here. The only thing it's interesting is that these two things, what it leads to is capital fatigue is a matter of choice. You can say, we don't want to do this. Let's just wait out till cloud AI becomes inexpensive enough for us to use. Cognitive fatigue is your biggest challenge because you will lose those intelligent people, smart people. They will go to OpenAI. They will go to Google because you spark the fire of their made them inquisitive. You spark the fire of imagination in the heads of your banking financial analysts who also have some form of PhD in econometry or something else. They're going to be taking calls from OpenAI and they're going to say, hey, come and work for us.
Right.
So in the end of the day, but again, like I say, let's call it, Schumpeter, he said, this is capital sort of, creative destruction, right? So things happen. That's okay. But
and this image, I want to point something out because you're talking about fatigue. The reason we are innovating all over again, it's necessary because our muscles are fatigued, right? Because we really are tired of just doing repeatable things over and over with our muscles. And all of a sudden we said, like, well, it's mentally draining to do this tiring work. How do we automate it? And that's the challenge that we've had for decades and thousands of years. As in, we think of technology as in starting of the server days, right? When the server started, that's when the technology started. Well, technology is just this, just another form that we didn't label it correctly, right? And I really think this presentation makes all the sense to me because it kind of shows that history to tell people AI space is no different than what we have already been through, right?
Absolutely. Each time there has been
no different. It's just another technology. We just have to go through the hump.
Each time there has been a little bit of a bump of some innovation or automation in the industry, we've had people protest. So, I mean, if I look at the life of this belt maker, Herman, if you see, This guy had one task. He would just use a hacksaw and anvil to punch holes in a belt, and that was his job.
Right.
So this was a factor of one in terms of productivity. That is what he knew. That is what he did, and that's how he succeeded. Now, here, when you saw, Ford, when they introduced their vehicle, you had to have more skills. You had to do part installation, quality control, equipment operations, safety compliance, and those four things were making, for example, this hypothetical worker, Fred Johnson, be a multitasking individual. So that is how we got to a 4x kind of an individual.
That's right.
And fast forward to 2000 to 2020, we have internet, we have banking and payment services. And I use this example of PayPal mafia because most of the people who are actually funding all the AI startups, including an OpenAI, are ex-PayPal people. So these people realize that having 8x to 10x employee, and they've been envisioning this kind of a productivity for a long time. As more and more software is coming, if you look at Andreessen Horowitz, those kind of individuals are also driving this automation. But still, if you look at these specific skills, product development, soft skills, testing, DevOps, team leadership, optimization, security, system architecture design, and a couple of other skills that these people possess, guys like Elon Musk, who was part of PayPal,
That's
or Reid Hoffman.
I was
Peter
looking for
Thiel.
Elon Musk in this picture. I just saw Peter Thiel, and I do not see Elon Musk there, but he probably should
Yeah,
have been.
Max Levchin and all those people, including the Palantir guys, which is led by Peter Thiel, as you know, that's a security startup that is helping the governments across the world. All those people, Alex Karp, all those people are there in this photo. So what you're seeing is that the 10x startup is what they envisioned already 25 years ago.
That's right.
But without any form of automation that could run on itself. So it was still a human-led effort. And now if you move to the next slide, it's interesting that the Auto GPT was something which people started releasing. So these were multi-agents that would do anything. So for example, and these GitHub libraries are already out there. So you could go and tell this Auto GPT, which will have a multiple agents connected to itself. You could say, here is $10, come up with, or maybe let's say here is $1,000 to make it a bit realistic, and go make me $100,000 and tell me how you're going to make that $100,000 in the next 5 years. Now imagine this whole paradigm is very dramatic because you would need some financial advisor, or you would need to be a very clever person who has technical skills, financial skills, and all other skills around yourself to be able to know how to make that money. So Auto GPT is something that is happening in the industry today. It's happening really under the surface. There are like hundreds of startups that are being funded by Y Combinator, and you're going to see forms of Auto GPT coming in where multiple tasks would be happening, where today we require people in different departments, HR, finance, marketing. You will have Auto GPT slowly eroding or eating away those jobs. Now, for an entrepreneur, it's a great thing. So I have 7 people company. I raised 50 million, and then I'm doing a revenue. I'm already on a revenue runway of 75 million in the second year. It's unbelievable for VCs. They're excited. It's unbelievable for founders. It's unbelievable for founders because the payoff is huge. So it's not anymore like I spent 10 years building a company, and in the end of the day, I get 200 million, and the company has a valuation for 10 billion. They can walk away with a really big chunk of cash. So great for entrepreneurs, great for VCs. But this is bad news for workers. So we still have, today, even US, there was an announcement today, the US employment figures were out, and the job figures were out, and they were showing that 350,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy. Now, if someone or anyone takes a little bit of interest to go and look at what kind of jobs they were not in technology. They were not in all that white collar jobs. They're not there. They're going to be there in perhaps more masseuse sessions have been started, masseuse companies, or people giving some kind of other everything that is only purely human, that does not require any automation. Those are the different kind of jobs. So the genre of job creation is also changing.
That's right.
So what does this mean for people like you and I? It means that if there's someone smarter than you and I, and we're going to encounter those people, they would probably go 10 or 50 times faster than us.
That's right.
Now, for example, let's just focus on this slide. So here, this is how I used to hire people. And it's impossible to get someone with these skills. So I call this a theory of M. And then there is this theory of M square, which is a presentation I made and a keynote I gave last December. So typically in a consulting environment, for example, if you have, let's say, 5 skills, so the pillars are your core skills. So A, B, and C are your core skills. You are a financial consultant. You know software programming, and you are excellent and actually very good in making those presentations. So you're like a McKinsey consultant who has a domain expertise, who has technical expertise, and who has presentation expertise and can sit in front of a CEO, even if you're like a 3-year graduated from Harvard MBA, you could actually help those companies. Now, and the top skill D and E are complementary skills. You would probably have speaking skills, and your employer would use your skills to actually promote their company. And there could be another additional skill which helps complement. So this bar M already is enough for a human to actually, more than 5, it just becomes impossible for you to master.
Right.
One would argue that BCG and McKinsey and all those people have these companies. That's why these companies have been, they're liked a lot by, big employers, because, they're smart people. They know what they want. And in fact, they have like a couple of skills which they can deploy with ease and expertise and, the M square aspect of this human ingenuity is where, on the left, you see, this is the human ingenuity. I have also been fortunate to do that. I knew in consulting, I had to learn those things. I was technology expert. I became a financial expert. I could sit together with, head of infrastructures and head of application management, CEOs and board members, and bring all that stuff into, complex Excel sheets. I could do that. But my ingenuity was limited to working with 1 or 2 clients because I would exhaust myself. My cognitive fatigue would take over, and then I just cannot do more than that.
Yes.
But today, with Gen AI, I could launch agents in various industries where I have zero understanding of. Now, let's take this bold sort of this step in one direction. Let's say I have zero understanding of pharmaceutical industry in terms of how they do drug discovery, etc. I could let and train my GPT. So I'm a financial expert, and I can do software programming, and I can do all that stuff. So then I have another Terry sitting next to me who would be my agent, who would have everything. So agent 1 is pharmaceutical industry, agent 2 is going to be tourism industry, agent 3 is going to be real estate industry, and I could launch 50 Gen AI bots or agents. Now you merge these two together, and that's where the M square, so human and machine. So human has to be in control, meaning I should have sufficient knowledge to understand that I'm talking about pharmaceutical, and they mention companies like Merck or Novartis, and I'm just not randomly coming up and hallucinating things. So so it's like almost a dashboard of 50 little Terrys sitting and sort of working, and they're making money for this human. And this human is just sitting and controlling those dashboards with these 50 agents. So this is what I'm talking about, 50x or 100x organization. And these discussions, Asif, are really happening right now in Silicon Valley. So this elitist sort of world in which they are figuring out how to further hyper automate, our life, is going to be impacting us in the next, and our kids as well, because we might be technophiles. We might love technology. My kids don't, for example. My son is studying history, and the younger one is doing industrial design. So if they do not have AI as a companion, as a friend, there might be someone else who has AI as a companion, as a friend, and those kids, my kids, would be at a disadvantage if they don't learn about it.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a bit of a gray future that I'm painting, but
Right.
I think as Gen AI becomes conversational, because Gen AI is conversational. I mean, your mom and pop and even my grandma, and those people are sitting and talking to these interfaces, and
Yeah.
send a birthday gift to my great grandchildren and
Right.
write it in this tone, and say this, and so people are beginning to use that. So this is it is happening, but I'm more concerned about the white collar sort of this layer that is shrinking gradually.
I,
um,
I think I think you're the way you're framing it. There's just that beginning stage and the end stage, right? How you approach that beginning stage will indicate how the ending will happen, right? But there are some variables that will come along in the end stage that you probably will have to prepare for in the beginning stage, right? Because there's variables that you have to really know about. So even if you know you have a human brain and is very capable of doing certain things, you still have to rely on the fact that you don't know what could happen at the end, but you have to prepare for what that ending should look like and how do you
yeah.
get some control over it. Because ending is full of variables, but the ending has some control that you should have, and that's how you measure your success at the end. So I think for if you look at the full industry, right, regardless of who it is that have AI, who
Right.
doesn't, Peter Demandis will say, either you have AI or you're declaring bankruptcy. That's the future, right? But somewhere in between, you will have a advantage to survive, right? And having said that, I think we will all see our problems because everybody has problems. Everybody just has a different types of problem.
Yeah.
So when you have a beginning stage of that identifying that problem and you want to see the end stage of that problem, you have to really not go at it by yourself. You really
Yeah.
want to be able to say, who do I need to bring in to audit my thought process and what the end should look like and what the control is like. So I highly recommend that you upskill your workforce
Yeah.
because if you're trying to control anything outside of your organization and say, oh, these guys will help me, whatever the case is, well, not necessarily because the journey ends with your own workforce. So if you're a decision maker, if you're a CEO, your end stage control piece that you will have very little of, by the way, but still is the workforce that you have upskilled and developed, and that pushed you to the end stage. Whatever that end stage is another beginning anyway, right?
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is when you upskill, that's the only control you have today, and that's the only control that will benefit you at the end stage, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
when you were talking about like earlier, you mentioned multiple industries and their problems. Look, uh, these problems we've had before. These are human issues that we've had before. And if you're incorporating those human behaviors and human issues to your solution, you cannot lose because you're literally are using historical information that we've had. And we've seen where people have failed is that because they neglected the people in the process and
Yeah.
emphasize too much on the technology. So when you
Yes.
emphasize too
Yes.
much on the technology versus the people, no matter what size of people you have, team of 10 or team of 100 or team of 1,000, it's all possible. It's just a matter of have you upskilled those individuals and do they
Yeah.
know enough about the technology? Because
Yeah.
ultimate dilemma historically we have seen all the time is that what if I don't train my people and then stay? Right? If I don't train my people, they stay. But if I train them, they leave. Right? But what if they stay and they're not trained? It's far more concerning to me than to say, well, I trained somebody and they left. Well, if you train 5 and 3 stayed, that means you're still winning, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
are kind of
Absolutely.
measurements that I think we really need to start the discussions with. Is that you're framing people, process, and technology. Technology is the end goal, but if you're not starting with the people, I think you're missing out the whole
Absolutely.
technological
Yeah.
development that needs to come at the end stage.
Yeah.
Well put, beautifully put. I really love this M2 theory because the agents, right? I call them the knobs. You dial the knobs and
Yeah.
you turn them on and off, and there's 50 agents that are doing 50 different things. but still there's a manual task in knowledge management that needs to happen.
Totally. I think so. I mean, listen, I painted a picture, probably utopian picture, and the world is not as binary as Peter. And I know when he goes on stage and he's getting Elon on his phone and getting Elon to say some things, which I think Elon is also, no disrespect to him, sometimes misinformed in the way he projects, the doomer. There's either a doomer approach or there is this over optimistic utopian approach.
Yeah.
The real world is actually always in between. And I always tell people, that, listen, in the cloud computing days or virtualization days, networking days, internet days, what was the outcome? The outcome was more people were employed, more people got jobs, millions of more people came into this the economy. So if you look at AI economy, it's going to grow dramatically.
That's right.
I think the prosperity is going to spread dramatically. But you're absolutely right. Today, I can talk about what we have been learning from AI is because I spent time learning about AI. I think organizations should do that. They definitely need to invest in their workforce. They need to get those, smaller teams across this workforce, build small applications, learn about the implications of AI, learn about the pros and cons, understand how to manage and control that they obey the instructions that you're trying to set the rules on.
Right.
So in stricter environments where regulation, compliance, finance, you cannot make mistakes.
That's right.
You need humans to do that. So I foresee that the work will be done by humans around. I do not see a world at all. I absolutely do not subscribe to super AGI or AGI. I think that is complete nonsense. But again, it's fine if people want to talk about it, but I think that's absolutely stupid. I always say there's a computer, there's a cable going into the wall. You pull that cable, the AGI is dead. So that's not how it works with you and I. You and I are walking AGIs. So let's celebrate that. We are really we are smart people.
Yeah.
And as you rightly mentioned, you cannot control the output, but you can control the input. The input can be managed once you become proficient in AI. So transforming a workforce, having them to learn about all the aspects of generative AI, reinforcement learning, computer vision, natural language processing, and all the other techniques that are around machine learning and deep learning, these are the foundations. I mean, that's that code, that software which is written by humans is going to empower your organization. So you have to learn. You have to make people learn, and this human and machine synergy will become beautiful when both components are used wisely. I do not see there will be some disruption in the market, but there's going to be like tens of thousands of new categories of jobs coming up, which we don't understand today. So there will be new jobs. You will be virtual assistants, robotic assistants. You would be, perhaps prompt assistants. You would help, communities build interesting prompts. There will be thousands of different categories. So I foresee a lot happening and a lot of good things happening out of this.
You mentioned something in the early stage that we've seen the report and the jobs has been added, but the jobs have been added in something so very little technical areas. So here's the thing. I've always wanted to say that you can have all sorts of debates. You all have some sort of doubts, and you can look at it from the doomer's perspective versus very optimistic perspective. But at the end of the day, in the middle, it's about having control, and the government is far more interested in taxing people than taxing AI. And whatever government can tax is what's going to win out. So when people pay taxes, that's how government stays in power. Government is able to function. So taxing and AI, if you look at it from that perspective, you will see AI doesn't win out in that tax debate. Tax debate is the human debate, and the human always win the tax argument. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, one thing that I will point out is that government has to, or anybody who's organizing these future solutions, they really have to look at it from the perspective of are we underemployed? Or are we employed? Right? Because you can have employment. That's what you mentioned earlier. That not everybody is. There's jobs being added, but are they being underemployed?
Yeah,
Or are they
yeah,
being
very
actually
good
employed?
point.
There's two
Very good
different
point.
key points, right? So, having said what you said, I think it's beautifully put. We really have to engage next week in the next week's conversation about opportunities, right? So we talked about finance, the cost side of things. Well, not everybody's interested in finance at this point. Not everybody's interested in all the productivity gain at this point. What about the entrepreneurs that will say, well, I
Yeah,
think differently. I'm 25 years
totally.
old. I have the rest of my life to live, and I have more skin in the game than somebody who's 50 plus years old. So I think we need to talk about opportunities. And for next week's conversation, I think we're going to have, the spectrum is wide. So we really will have to, walk down this lane of what are the opportunities that we see today. And one of the opportunities that I'm fascinated with is underemployment and employment, right? How
Yeah,
do we teach an AI system to say, you can predict. Why don't you start predicting what sort of jobs we will need? so,
yeah,
so I think the jobs that we will need in the future, let the AI predict it, let the AI draw a picture for us, so that way we can start preparing for those jobs. But with that said, sir, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, and
thank you very much.
we'll see you. In a series here, because we'll continue this discussion because it's
Definitely,
only.
very exciting. Yes, very excited to be with you, Asif, and we'll touch various topics. Tooling, platforms, services, and obviously, we can retouch cost, because costing still needs to be figured out. Cloud computing took a couple of years before the costing was sort of tied down to CPU, networking, even disk level, and this evolution still has to happen. So we are still in really early days. Fortunately, the excesses that we are seeing in the market will disappear. Will have to. There is no way you cannot sell $1 million car to the regular, Tom, Dick, and Harry. You have to bring the price point down to $25,000 to $50,000. From that sort of analogy, that's how we need to bring AI services. So there are many interesting topics to cover. Hopefully,
Well,
together we can learn, and
yeah.
hopefully our audience can also
Yeah.
participate and learn with us. Thank you so much, Asif.
Thank you
Take
so much,
care,
sir.
and I'll see
I'll
you
see
next week
you in
again.
a bit, and have a good rest of the day.
You too. Take care, buddy. Take care. Ciao.
Ciao.